Check. 1, 2, 2.
The D. Brief. This is the D Brief.
Go. Your guide to Detroit.
Your guide to Detroit's arts
and entertainment scene.
This is the D
Brief.
Hello and welcome to the debrief as we're figuring out all our technical kinks coming back from July 4th. I'm your co-host. My name is Seth Ressler.
And I'm Becky Scarcello.
How are you? How was your 4th?
Like what was the pause for? It was good. It was good. Yeah. So I had a big birthday too and did lots of cool things. So I'm a little like coming down from that now.
I understand. This was a big one, was it not?
It was.
This was like this was like in the car when the odometer rolls over, and it's a big moment because there's a new 0 or 2 or 3. How many zeros are there?
Yes.
So, well, happy birthday.
I'll leave it to you to decide. Yeah.
Did you do one of those
Thank
pandemic parades with cars? Were there a bunch of cars with balloons that drove by the front of your house?
We did not do that. It's been a series of little celebrations and some video stuff and some in-person social distance stuff, and even went to a restaurant, even did a staycation. So nice. Highly recommend the Elmore.
I think life is just one big staycation right now. So
exactly. So we did it up. You know, the coolest one, all of it was cool, but one really cool thing we did was a moonlight kayak on the Detroit River and the canals. So there was a full moon, and Sunday night headed out about 10 p.m. and we're out there till after midnight in the pitch darkness, which is the light of the moon and a few little lights on the kayak, and it was pretty sweet.
Very cool. Well, welcome back. This, if you are just tuning in, is a podcast normally, and now a live stream, now that we're in pandemic land, about Detroit's arts and entertainment scene. There is not a lot going on lately in the Detroit arts and entertainment scene, of course, because of the pandemic and the lockdown, but things are starting to open up. In fact, later this week, a lot of the cultural institutions in Midtown are going to open up. And so we have a guest who is going to be joining us from Midtown Detroit in just a few moments. Annmarie Boruck, who is the director of arts and culture for Midtown Detroit, is going to tell us all about everything that's going on. And then, of course, at the end of the show, we are going to do shout outs. So if there's anybody that, if you're watching this on Facebook or on YouTube and you have any questions for Annmarie, feel free to leave them in the comments. If there's anybody locally in the arts and entertainment scene that you want to give a shout out to, feel free to leave it in the comments as well, and we will get to that. With that, let's bring Annmarie on. Annmarie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome. Yeah.
So, look, we're going to get into the reopening of all the cultural institutions in Midtown. Before we do that, Becky, we always like to start with some trivia. What have you got this week?
Yes, so I was inspired by the Michigan Opera Theater announced last week that they are going to go ahead with their season, but of course it's going to look a little different, and it's going to be kind of exciting and unique. They're going to do some different things, like having some performances outdoors, some that are smaller scale with the actual dancers and performers being socially distant. They're going to try out some other different venues. All the details are coming in the next couple weeks on michiganopera.org. But it got me thinking about what an incredible building the Michigan Opera Theater is, the Opera House there in Detroit. And I wanted to talk to you guys about it, see how much you know about the history. So it opened on January 22nd, 1922. It was designed by C. Howard Crane, who also did the Fillmore, the Fox, Orchestra Hall. So he was very prolific as far as Detroit beautiful buildings went as an architect. And at the time of the opening, it was the 5th largest theater in the U.S. So my question to you is, what was the Detroit Opera House known as? What was the name of it prior to being called Detroit Opera House? Was it A, the Capitol Theater, B, the Paramount Theater, C, Broadway Capitol Theater, D, Grand Circus Theater, or E, all of the above?
That's a lot of choices. I don't know. Run through those choices one more time.
Capitol Theater, Paramount Theater, Broadway Capitol Theater, Grand Circus Theater, or all of those?
I don't know. Annmarie, do you have any idea?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'll go with Capitol.
Capitol.
Okay.
That sounds like a reasonable guess. I have no idea either. I will join in that. I will say that that's a boring name. It's before we name things after people. You know.
Right.
Yeah, fine. Capital, I guess. So, sure.
You're a little bit right. It's actually all of them. So it's gone through all those name changes.
Wow.
Since 1922. Right. And I named them in order. So when it was built, it was known as the Capitol Theater. And then it became Detroit's like first proper movie house. Like that's where people would go see films. And then through the years, it became Paramount. There was a lot of jazz happening there. Then the Broadway Capitol Theater. Then it was the Grand Circus Theater because it is there in Grand Circus Park. But yeah, it went through all those name changes until it became Detroit Opera House.
But it's not like any of those name changes happen like things today where we name a building after a person and then we find out what that person was really like and we have all these regrets and we change the name.
Right. Thankfully, I didn't dig up any ugly history like that.
Right. It was never named after anybody who was racist or anything like that in the past.
It was all place based, not people based.
Now we just name it after whatever corporate sponsor there is. And that's what
where's the money. Yeah.
Change. Right. Yeah. So, all right. Well, speaking of cultural institutions, Annmarie, we're so glad that you're here because there's starting to be some reopening in Midtown. Can you tell us what's happening this week?
So Friday, July 10th is the big day where all of our museums in the Cultural Center, including the Detroit Institute of Arts, the Detroit Historical Museum, the Michigan Science Center, and the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History, along with a couple other smaller organizations, including the Scarab Club, the Hellenic Museum of Michigan, and the Carr Center, will all be reopening to the public on this Friday. And things will be very different moving forward for a little while.
I bet. What are some of the changes that visitors will see?
Well, definitely. I mean, because of COVID, there will be reduced visitor capacity with the museums. You know, now you can't just necessarily show up. You should read everyone's websites first, buy your tickets online, try and see what the available slots are for visiting these museums. In addition, I mean, we're kind of entering a no cash period. Credit cards, debit cards are generally the way of going. Most will not be offering food. A lot of extra programming won't be around. I mean, a number of the exhibition spaces will be open. But I mean, there will be a lot of signage guiding people how you enter into these buildings, how you exit, a lot of one-way traffic patterns to get people in safely from one exhibition space to another. We're all learning as we're moving forward here. And it's been great to work as a collective where, you know, we're trying to follow all the executive orders, the city of Detroit guidelines, as well as what WHO and OSHA and the CDC have put together to try and create a safe experience for visitors to come back to the Cultural Center.
Can you talk about the efforts to coordinate all of this? Because you've got quite a number of organizations that you've had to get together and agree on all this. What did that look like?
Well, we've all been working together for quite some time anyways. It's all kind of stemmed from the work we're doing on the Cultural Center Planning Initiative. I think many of the listeners here may recall that Midtown Detroit Inc. and the DIA had developed an international design competition in 2018, where we were looking for a design firm from around the world to help us reimagine what the Cultural Center could look like and develop this idea of a town square for the district to come to. And so we've been working together for quite a long time. We've developed a number of working committees around programming and marketing and operations. So we already had a structure in place where we were meeting regularly anyways. So once the COVID hit, we all knew that we had to shift our focus and figure out how to all reopen together that would be stronger together working as a group. We were all swimming in guidelines at that time from what was coming out from all the regulatory authorities, and we knew we needed help. And so under the direction of Midtown Detroit Inc., we brought in an environmental risk firm called NSF International to kind of guide us through the process. I mean, these are public health officials, epidemiologists, scientists, trying to create best practices for people to develop, like more stringent cleaning enhancements for everyone's institutions. How do you train your employees for dealing with the public or for just dealing with this new normal that we all have now? But also how you communicate outward to the public about the changes that people are going to see at the institutions. It's just for everyone's safety, for each institution's staff and the visitors, to try and get everyone to come back and enjoy and celebrate the culture, the cultural assets that we have there.
Yeah.
I think one of the important. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, well, you raised that question, that point of how do you train the staff? How do you train the staff to deal with the public in this?
It's a lot of time. So, I mean, each institution has now developed teams that are responsible for putting together these protocols. What we did together as a district and working with NSF is that we developed it's basically a phone book size template of everything you need to think about in terms of heating and cooling, water management, health screenings for your employees and for visitors that come in all these various areas that then become customized for each institution of how do you adapt these best practices that are in line with all these other regulatory guidelines and the executive orders that come out of the governor's office, from the small business playbook from the city of Detroit, and trying to make sense of it all, of doing things that will work and keep your visitors safe within your institutions. So it takes a lot of time. I mean, we've been working on this for over 6 weeks now in trying to create a plan that everyone can customize for their institution. Each operations director or security director, I mean, you're involving people from all departments at these institutions. Some of them are bigger than others. And you're taking on a lot and trying to walk through and assess all the areas that might be the high touch points. Do we eliminate drinking fountains from our institutions so that people don't have to use them? Do we eliminate certain types of seating in here to try and enforce more physical distancing? How do we create the pathways that walk through our institutions that are safe, but yet at the same time you can still enjoy the art and the different exhibitions that are there? It takes a lot of time. And all of these institutions know their employees best and have been able to put together great teams for guiding this process. But then at the same time, we all meet regularly on a weekly basis of communicating what is working, what is not working, and sharing the latest research on COVID and what other museums and institutions are doing around the world.
I think the important thing to think about too is all this work that you're doing. This is going to help visitors' mental health just so tremendously. I think we all just get so much positivity from these institutions. And so if you've set up a safe, comfortable place to go, we can get back to experiencing art and feeling culture and being, immersed in something that's outside of our house and is enriching. And I think just like being out in nature, being able to be back in, say, the DIA and take in the paintings, I think that's really important for health. So the cultural aspect, I think, is going to start to become an essential again, which I love.
I couldn't agree more with that. I think if anything, it's a way to remind everyone of their humanity, of learning about everyone else's stories, whether you're at the Detroit Historical Museum or at the Michigan Science Center. People have to still be inspired to learn. And art and culture is a fantastic way to do that. It's also a great way to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, to try and see that there are other different perspectives out there on how to be, and that there's no one right way of living or pursuing, creativity in this world. If anything, it's a great way to just bring people together again in a safe way. I feel like so many people have been isolated for so long, and you get kind of stuck in your own bubble and you forget what's out there. That this is a great way to bring people back together in a very safe way.
What's been the biggest challenge in organizing this reopening? Is there something that we wouldn't think of?
I think the biggest challenge is sourcing personal protection equipment. It's for a long time, getting masks, face masks was very difficult. Now face masks are a lot easier to come by, but now something like disinfecting wipes are very hard to come by. And when you're an institution and you're trying to clean on a regular basis, which people are going to see, there's going to be, continued cleaning throughout the day at all of these institutions. Imagine the cost of operating now has doubled because you need more cleaning supplies, to not only clean your institutions, but after people touch things. I mean, you want everything to continue to be safe. But I think the biggest thing is the cost and the sourcing of personal protection equipment and cleaning agents for all these institutions. I never thought it would be this difficult. But
Right.
when you're competing against so many other institutions and businesses, everyone needs it to reopen. And then you're competing against other cities and states. And so we're stronger together as well if we can work collectively on purchasing some of that PPE as well. There might be some places where you can only order in like the thousands versus like, I only need 100 masks, but I might not be able to do that. And I might need to work with other institutions to be able to order, thousands of masks.
Right. Yeah.
Now,
Go ahead.
what can you ask of visitors? I would say, we're going to need people to be patient, to be understanding new rules. What would your message be to those that are, going to sign up to visit in these first weeks?
Well, I would also say that they need to be kind to other people that are around. We're all trying to figure out how we work within this new normal. And, there will probably be changes even made once we reopen and we figure out what works and what doesn't work. And as things change with COVID, I mean, if increased cases happen in the state of Michigan, which fingers crossed that they don't, you might see changes based around that. So what I would say is people have to remain flexible. And also before you come to the cultural center, you should always visit the websites of the institutions that you would like to visit, just to make sure that you are aware of what their policies are, because that's your responsibility as a consumer of arts and culture, is to know what is the expectation of you as well. You're entering into private institutions that may have rules that might differ somewhat from other places, and to be patient with that. We're doing the best we can to ensure a safe experience for all visitors and for all the employees of these institutions.
So walk us through that. Let's take the DIA, for example, because I think that's a large one that, so many people are familiar with. From the time that, I decide, hey, this weekend we're going out to the DIA, walk me through what that might look like, what happens when we get on site, how it might be different than it may have been in the past.
So with the DIA, now they're doing online ticketing. So, I mean, first of all, before you can even come, you can also call them on the phone as well. And all that information is on their website at dia.org. But you're going to need to select your tickets and the time that you want to come and the window of time. And then when you arrive, you'll park. They are having all visitors now enter from the Farnsworth entrance. Instead of a lot of people were used to entering from the John R. entrance before, or you could go through the Woodward. But now they're trying to guide traffic through that Farnsworth entrance. You'll enter, you'll have to show your tickets, whether on paper or maybe it's an e-ticket you show on your phone to get in. They will have different decals on the floor, signage everywhere, kind of showing you where the traffic flows will be from getting in one space to the next. If there's too many people potentially in one gallery, you might have to wait to enter in before it's deemed safe. There will be a lot more hand sanitation stations, throughout, so that you can constantly, keep your hands clean. The cafes will not be open. So that'll be probably somewhat of a disappointment for people. But, as things improve, if, COVID cases don't increase and it's deemed safe, eventually I think a number of institutions like the DIA will look at potentially reopening that and seeing what that looks like. The museum store will be open, but we'll have some limited offerings inside. But, there won't be any extra programming going on. Essentially, it's the gallery spaces that you're going in to visit and see, the fabulous artwork that is there. The same thing with going to the Michigan Science Center. There may be some installations there that they may take offline just because there's too many high touch points on it. But there's still a number of things to go through and see and learn about science. So I think if anything, it's just one, being required to wear a mask.
I think about the Science Center,
like the
and I
number
think
one
about that
thing we
lightning
should-
ball that you touch, the globe that everybody touches, and the lightning touches their finger. I'm like, there's no
Oh,
way
yeah.
they can do that. You'd have to just
No.
have to Windex it like every 2 minutes.
Mhm.
So I think that it's just going to take a little bit of getting used to, but it's something that's definitely worth doing to ensure the safety for everyone's experience is there.
Yeah. Good way to get the kids out and involved in other things again. And like you said, just open up your own personal world a bit again. And we have such wonderful gems of places here in Detroit. I'm so excited that you've been working so hard to be able to do this. And members can still go free to these places. Tri-county residents can still go free in some cases to the DIA. And, there's still access there, which is wonderful for the
And at the same time, too, if people don't want to come to these
community.
institutions, there's still a lot of programming that's available on their websites, virtual tours of different gallery spaces, online films that you can still watch, free musical programming that a number of these places do, whether it's the Carr Center. And then even with those people who have kids at home, the virtual summer camps that the Science Center, the Historical Museum, and the Wright Museum are all offering. There's still a lot to do if you don't want to come to the Cultural Center in person.
We have seen in a lot of states in the South that they reopen too fast and that they've closed back down, or they've withdrawn. Have you guys had discussions about, under what circumstances you might have to shut back down, or is that an order that would come from the mayor or the governor? What is the contingency plan there?
That's a tough question because everyone has different capacity within these institutions. Not everyone has the size or the scale like the DIA, for example. So it's going to be different per institution. One good thing is that we still talk weekly.
And complimentary. Yeah.
But at the same time, it comes down to what will, the next executive order potentially look like from Governor Whitmer, or what will come out from the city of Detroit. We are working very closely with both entities to make sure that what we are providing meets the requirements of their guidelines. And so they're all well aware of the plans that we have for moving forward, but we're all well aware that we could all shut down again. Perhaps if there was a breakout at one institution and it affects a number of their employees, they more than likely may have to shut down temporarily. It may not be as long of shutdowns, but it's one of those things that we know that we have to remain flexible and adapt to the real world experiences as they happen. And I think as a collective, we can try to make that decision together, but that may not always work out.
Are the different cultural institutions in different places when it comes to how important a stream of revenue, ticket sales or walk-through traffic is versus some organizations may get, whether it's money from grants or money from donations or other places. And does that play a factor as you're mapping out this strategy?
Well, I mean, all of these institutions are nonprofits. They're all dependent on foundation support, the support of private donors, corporate support. They're also all dependent on revenue that comes in from ticket sales, whether it's for, general admission coming into their museums, or, it's purchasing, tickets to go to the planetarium. So since the shutdown, I mean, you can imagine that there's been a lot of lost revenue.
Yeah.
And knowing moving forward between now and the end of the year, there's no way to recoup that. But the goal is that we need to try to reopen, try to continue to serve our constituencies safely, and try to kind of continue to provide quality arts and cultural programming, whether in person or online. Revenue is part of the conversation, but it's not the number one thing. It's definitely about ensuring the safety of everyone's employees and visitors first. Otherwise, I mean, if you can't guarantee that, then if you're at risk of shutting down again, I mean, you're just going to increase, even further loss of revenue moving forward.
Yeah.
So,
what types of longer term conversations? And by the way, we seem to have lost Becky. We'll get her back here in a minute. What type of longer term conversations are you having? I mean, are you looking towards the fall? Are there conversations about, because I imagine that there's a lot of school field trips and things like that to these organizations. Thinking ahead, what are you guys talking about?
well, a lot of that's going to come down to what the state allows. As of right now, all of the museums are not doing any tours for school groups or community groups or anything like that as of yet. What we're talking about is what fall and winter looks like, whether you start slowly phasing in like on-site programming, whether it's small musical performances and the various theaters that are there, whether or not school groups will return, but a lot has to be figured out on that end with how schools will reopen. I mean, I think a lot of people are aware of the three different plans that all schools have to develop for moving forward, whether they're on site full time, whether it's a hybrid model of both remote learning. I think a lot of the institutions are not counting on those school groups really coming back this year. I think people are more focused on whether or not you're going to open up your institutions again for private rentals, weddings, other types of, maybe family reunions that you used to have at these institutions. And how do you do that safely?
Right.
And I think that a lot of people are really looking for 2021, as long as we progress on this, this safe journey where, COVID seems to be under control in the state. But I think 2021 is where people have their eyes on of really trying to bring back more programming. But at the same time, I think we've learned that, virtual programming is not going away. I think that you don't want to do all virtual programming, but that's going to probably be part of everyone's toolkit moving forward of still delivering services, to their members, to visitors.
Thanks. Last question. I mean, we began this discussion talking about how you were all already talking to each other because, of course, you were working on this big town plaza concept. What has the pandemic meant for that? And has it changed dates on when that's going to arrive?
Well, the design work has been continuing all the way through the pandemic. We are still moving forward for trying to develop a large master plan for the district, which we will be ready to begin sharing with the public in the fall for feedback. So that will continue to move forward. If anything, though, I think actually implementing aspects of that master plan probably take a little bit longer with the economic setback that the district has had due to COVID. But if anything, the pandemic has also taught us that we are stronger when we work together as a district. And there are things that the public will see sooner before actual capital improvements to the district We're beginning to work on developing a larger brand for the district, a website for the district. We're working much closer with the city of Detroit and their parking department on the new parking app that they're going to be launching here fairly soon and tying into that. We are looking at developing free public Wi-Fi for the district, which we do now have funds to begin pursuing.
Nice.
So there will be a lot of things that are going to be happening here because of the work we've been doing together for the last few years. So COVID hasn't completely stopped our aspirations as a district. If anything, it's taught us that by working together, we are stronger if we can create a streamlined visitor experience from institution to institution. And if we can try and create amenities that people will want to linger longer in the district. Normally in the past, some people might have just been coming to just go to the DIA, or maybe people were just coming to the Detroit Historical Museum. But now there's more of an opportunity to encourage people to go visit from one to the next. So that if normally you wouldn't have gone and seen the Wright Museum of African American History, which everyone should go visit, having this planning process will help us kind of make that an easier choice for people to make, that it is worth going to all of these institutions. I mean, for us, our benchmark is the Smithsonian.
Right.
And when you go to Washington, D.C., and you see all of those amazing institutions, all within walking distance, there's no reason why our district can't be the same. So that's kind of where we are, is that we plan to do a lot more coordinated programming together.
Yeah. Does that mean that there may be, for example, a day pass that gets you into multiple institutions for a single price or things like that coming down the pike as well?
Well, we've looked at that, and I don't know if that, those are not money makers for sure for any district, but they are a way to get people to come back and try and make it easier for people to visit. So yes, we're looking at a number of things like that to make it easier, and also trying to develop further incentives to get people to come.
Cool. Well, we look forward to it. All right. Before we wrap up the show, there's one last thing that we like to do, which is get into shout outs. So let's go ahead and do that. By the way, welcome back, Becky. Who,
I know. Not quite sure what was happening there. So
that's all right.
Yeah.
So this is something that we do every show. And if you're just joining us, our guest today is Annmarie Boruck, who is the Director of Arts and Culture for Midtown Detroit, Inc., and is joining us because, of course, a number of those cultural institutions in Midtown are going to be opening up later this week. Let's do shout outs. Becky, let's start with you. Who do you want to recognize this week?
I would like to shout out the Kresge Arts Detroit. So they gave out their annual Kresge Artist Fellow Award. So this is funding, grant funding that's provided by the Kresge Foundation and administered by the College for Creative Studies to people doing outstanding things in the arts in the Metro Detroit area. And this year is really cool, kind of recognizing the need is even greater with so many creative people out of work or not able to do things in their traditional venues and that sort of thing. So it's up this year. They gave away $550,000 to 30 artists. So super cool. 20 different artists got $25,000 each, and 10 got $5,000 each. So we're talking performing arts like dance and playwriting, and we're talking filmmakers and musicians, and you can see the whole list. It's an incredible amount of talent represented here. You can go to KresgeArtsInDetroit.org to see them all. But I love that, the arts are in some ways really flourishing now because artists have had this sort of time and inspiration to be creative, but then at the same time they've lost lots of opportunities for their traditional way to make a livelihood. So I just applaud Kresge's enhanced commitment to really, it shows that we care about the arts in Detroit. It really shows the commitment, like this is important, and this is emphasizing that creative arts help all of us to thrive. So
Annmarie, how do you see the impact of these types of grants and scholarships and awards in the course of what you do there at Midtown?
Well, Midtown has actually worked with the Kresge Arts in Detroit program for years. We used to administer the ArtX Detroit Festival that showcased all of those fellows. And it's really important because to get a no strings attached fellowship amount, of $25,000 can help a lot of artists further their creative practice and try out new things that they normally wouldn't have been able to. Or for instance, just developing a good website that provides them more visibility online. I think it's really an amazing opportunity that's not unique to Detroit, but it's a great way for people to kind of test out things, get professional development opportunities at the same time, because, we're all human. We're constantly learning as artists, learning new things of how we deliver our creative practice. And the other great thing about the Kresge Arts in Detroit program is how much it encourages partnerships amongst different Detroit artists to work together to see how perhaps a literary artist could work with a film artist or vice versa to create some new products that they normally wouldn't have done before. I think is a really exciting opportunity.
Cool.
Yeah, and this has been going on for over a dozen years. So you can look back. Their website's really cool too, because it highlights a lot of the past fellows, and guaranteed if you're anywhere in the arts world, you're like, oh, they were a fellow 5 years ago, and you can see the progress that artists have made, and they get hundreds of applications every year. So even those that don't win the awards, a lot of times end up making those types of connections that you're talking about.
Annmarie, what about you? Anybody you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, I do. I want to give a shout out to the Carr Center and Erin Falker Obichigua, who is their curator and senior creative director, a really important, up and coming African-American voice in the visual arts. She's curated a number of really fun exhibitions in their new space within the Park Shelton. It's called the Carr Center Contemporary on the first floor. People want to go grab dinner at Chartreuse, go over and see the latest exhibition in the Carr Center. I have to say that for a small arts and cultural organization, they delivered during COVID with their online arts and cultural programming. They've premiere a lot of music and dance. There's a lot of great support with people like Debbie Allen, who is the dance director for the Carr Center, Terry Covington, who's their music director. And Erin brings a really great, fresh perspective to curating visual arts exhibitions for the Carr Center. And I would highly encourage, if people haven't ever been to the Carr Center, to check out their new gallery space inside the lower level of the Park Shelton, right across from the Detroit Institute of Arts.
Nice. That's somebody we should actually have on the podcast. We haven't had her on yet, so we'll write that down on the list of guests.
Mm-hmm.
I want to give a shout out as well. There is a photographer from Southwest Detroit. Her name is Rosa Maria Zamarone, and she had a photo that went viral on Instagram over the 4th of July holiday weekend. I will show it to you. It is this right here. Yeah. And she took this photo. Let me see if I can get rid of the banner there so that you can see it. Of 4 Indigenous women who are from here in Detroit. This is a site. There was a Christopher Columbus statue here. And Mayor Duggan had it removed a couple of weeks ago quietly because of everything that was going on with Black Lives Matter and all the statues coming down. And so you can see a very powerful statement here for Indigenous women. This is Courtney, Tia, Hadassah, and Joelle. They are jingle dancers. And this is part of a ceremony. I looked on YouTube. I tried to find somebody who knew how to pronounce this, because that's a very intimidating word to pronounce. I believe it's pronounced Wawi Tanong Resurgence, but I apologize if I mispronounced that. You can find a lot of information about it. It's fascinating. It's a ceremony that takes place during the blueberry moon, which is when the blueberries are supposed to be sweetest. But it's also a lot about reclaiming pride. The website that I list there talks about this event, and it's basically land back, but you can see replace the A in land and the A in back with the letter V, and you can get the whole story. But they outline the mission, which is threefold. 1, to acknowledge the people who were destroyed by colonialism. 2, to recognize the African diaspora. And 3, to uplift prayers to white accomplices and community members. And it's there's a reason it happens during 4th of July weekend, of course, because that's when we're celebrating a lot of colonialism and a lot of things that happen. So I think it's really interesting to see this as part of the discussion. And it really kind of captures a lot of what's going on in America and a lot of the discussion that's happening right now. But that was going viral on Instagram and came up in a lot of my social media feeds. So I just wanted to call everybody's attention to it. Annmarie, thank you so much for joining us. And seriously, thank you for all the hard work, because I can only imagine it must be like herding cats, getting all these organizations together.
Definitely.
And getting them all on the same page and getting everybody to open up and do so safely. Because yeah, like Becky said, it really does feel like it's time to, I don't know, not be doing Zoom calls all day.
Yeah.
So one more time, the organizations that are opening up later this week, who's on the list?
Detroit Historical Museum, the Carr Center, the Hellenic Museum of Michigan, the Detroit Institute of Arts, the Scarab Club, the Michigan Science Center, and the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. That's an
impressive list. That's a great list of organizations right there. And like you said, if you want to go to any of those, make sure you go to their website first, because there's a lot of ticketing and advanced slots and limited space because of everything that's going on. Annmarie, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me. We appreciate it.
Thanks for all your hard work.
Until next time, Detroit's moving.
Keep up.
The D Brief.
Your guide to Detroit's arts and entertainment scene.